Rebecca Clarke adjusted the strap of her worn-out handbag as she stepped into the towering glass skyscraper in the heart of New York City. Her job as a cleaner in the luxurious Crescent Towers was far from glamorous, but it paid the bills and, more importantly, funded her dream of becoming an interior designer. For years, Rebecca had envisioned herself creating breathtaking spaces filled with personality and life, unlike the cold, impersonal penthouses she now scrubbed clean every day. She often wondered if her future would ever align with the dreams she held so tightly. As Rebecca entered the opulent lobby of Crescent Towers, she felt the usual pang of self-consciousness. Thick carpets muffled her footsteps, and crystal chandeliers glittered above her, their light reflecting off the polished marble floors. The air was scented with expensive perfume from the passing elite, and her scuffed shoes seemed entirely out of place in this world of luxury. Despite the intimidating surroundings, Rebecca knew she couldn't afford to falter. This job was her stepping stone, and every day she reminded herself, one step closer to her dream. Unbeknownst to her, the assignment she would receive today, a seemingly ordinary task, would change her life forever, and it all began in the penthouse of Nathaniel Cross, the reclusive billionaire who rarely ventured beyond the 40th floor. Rebecca stood in the polished walnut wood elevator, her hands gripping the handle of her cleaning cart tightly. She took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the panel as the floor numbers lit up one by one. Floor 40, the top floor of Crescent Towers, housed the penthouse of Nathaniel Cross. It was her first time being assigned to clean there, and anticipation coursed through her veins. The elevator doors slid open, revealing a vast hallway lined with deep navy velvet carpets. Golden wall sconces cast a soft, warm glow across the corridor. Rebecca approached the penthouse door, a modern yet intricately detailed masterpiece. She took a deep breath, swiped the key card provided by management, and gently pushed the door open. The penthouse felt like stepping into another world. Towering ceilings, floor-to-ceiling glass windows showcasing a hazy morning view of New York City, and a monochromatic palette of grays and whites exuded sophistication. Everything from the marble dining table to the sleek leather armchairs radiated perfection. Yet the space felt lifeless, like a painting so flawless it lacked a soul. Rebecca began her work, carefully wiping down every immaculate surface. As she neared the bedroom, she noticed the bathroom door slightly ajar, wisps of steam escaping into the room. A faint scent of cool mint hung in the air, making her pause. Her heart skipped a beat. According to the schedule, the penthouse was supposed to be empty. Before she could react, the bathroom door swung open, and Nathaniel Cross stepped out. Clad in nothing but a towel loosely wrapped around his waist, his tan skin glistened under the soft bathroom lighting, his steely gray eyes locked onto Rebecca, freezing her in place. "Next time, check the schedule more carefully," Nathaniel said, his voice deep and commanding. Rebecca felt her face flush with embarrassment as she took a step back, inadvertently knocking over several cleaning supplies. The bottles clattered noisily to the floor. She crouched down to pick them up, stammering, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here." Nathaniel remained still, his piercing gaze never leaving her. Then, to her surprise, the corners of his lips curved into a faint, almost amused smile. "No need. Just carry on with your work." Rebecca hastily gathered her things and nearly fled the room, her heart pounding in her chest. And that was how she met Nathaniel Cross, not at a glamorous party or through an exclusive magazine feature, but in one of the most awkward and humiliating moments of her life. What she didn't know was that this unexpected encounter was only the beginning of a life-altering journey. In the days following their awkward first meeting, Rebecca continued working in Nathaniel Cross's penthouse. Though she tried to maintain her distance, she couldn't help but notice his increasing presence. At first, it was subtle, signs like a warm coffee cup left on the counter or a jacket draped casually over a chair. But soon Nathaniel began to appear more frequently, as though he was quietly observing her. One morning, as Rebecca carefully wiped down the marble kitchen counter, Nathaniel's deep, commanding voice startled her from behind. "You're quite diligent." Rebecca jumped, nearly dropping the cloth in her hands. She turned to see Nathaniel leaning against the doorway, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, his piercing gray eyes watching her intently. I'm just doing my job, Mr. Cross, she stammered, the familiar heat rising to her cheeks. Nathaniel nodded slightly, his gaze lingering on her for a moment. What's your name? Rebecca Clarke. He said nothing more, simply studying her before walking away. From that moment, Nathaniel began asking her seemingly casual questions about her work, her interests, and even her dreams. One day, as Rebecca was organizing books on the shelves in his study, she stumbled upon a copy of The Great Gatsby. She opened it, captivated by Fitzgerald's prose, when Nathaniel's voice broke the silence. Fitzgerald, he said, making her jump. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to... It's fine. He stepped into the room and took the book from her hands. I like how he writes about dreams and loneliness. Rebecca looked at him, surprised by the unexpected depth in his words. You enjoy classic literature? Nathaniel shrugged, a fleeting smile crossing his lips. Technology isn't the only thing I care about. Gradually, Rebecca discovered deeper layers to Nathaniel. During one of their conversations, he opened up about his younger brother Ethan. Ethan was my whole world, Nathaniel said, his voice softening. He was brilliant, creative, always saw the world with a kind of optimism I never had. Rebecca could hear the pain in his voice as he continued. But he died in an accident. At least, that's what they called it. I know it wasn't just an accident. What do you mean? Rebecca asked gently. Nathaniel's eyes turned distant as he stared out the window. Ethan uncovered something, fraud within the family company. I believe someone didn't want the truth to come out, but I have no proof. He paused, his gaze hardening. After Ethan's death, my mother and I stopped speaking. She refused to believe there was foul play and chose to protect the company instead of the truth. Rebecca felt her chest tighten at his words. Beneath the cold, calculated exterior of a billionaire, Nathaniel was a man carrying the weight of unresolved grief and familial conflict. Have you thought about reconciling with her? Rebecca asked quietly. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment before shaking his head. Some wounds can't be healed. From that moment on, Rebecca began to see Nathaniel in a new light. He wasn't just a powerful billionaire. He was a deeply wounded man, fighting to overcome the shadows of his past. As time went on, the relationship between Rebecca and Nathaniel grew closer. Though neither of them voiced their feelings, there was an unspoken connection between them. Nathaniel no longer kept his cold distance when speaking to Rebecca. His gaze softened, as if she was the only person who truly understood him. Rebecca, in turn, felt her heart race every time Nathaniel was near. But she buried her emotions, reminding herself that their worlds were far too different. Nathaniel began to trust Rebecca enough to share more about his life. One afternoon, as she was dusting the Steinway piano tucked away in the corner of the living room, he walked in and spoke unexpectedly. I haven't played that since Ethan passed, Nathaniel said, his voice low with nostalgia. He used to love listening to me play, but now it just reminds me of what I've lost. Rebecca set down her cloth and looked at him, her eyes sincere. Maybe you should play again, not for the memories, but for yourself. I think Ethan would want that for you. Her words seemed to strike a chord within Nathaniel, planting the first seeds of a thought he had avoided for years, confronting the past instead of running from it. As their relationship grew warmer, Rebecca often encouraged Nathaniel to reconcile with his mother. I think she's grieving too, just in her own way, Rebecca said one evening as they stood by the large window of the penthouse. Her voice was gentle but firm. You should talk to her, not for her, but for yourself. Nathaniel remained silent, his gaze fixed on the city lights below. For the first time, Rebecca saw a vulnerability in his expression, a crack in the armor he always wore. He turned to her, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. What if it changes nothing? He asked, almost to himself. Rebecca placed a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. It might not, she admitted. But at least you'll know you tried. And sometimes that's enough. That night, Nathaniel lay awake, Rebecca's words echoing in his mind. By morning, he knew what he had to do. Complications arose when Victoria Lane, Nathaniel's former fiancée, suddenly returned. One afternoon, as Rebecca was arranging fresh flowers in the living room, the sharp clack of high heels echoed across the wooden floor. She turned to see Victoria standing there, exuding elegance in a crimson dress that hugged her figure, her icy blue eyes scrutinizing Rebecca with thinly veiled disdain. "Oh, so you're the new housekeeper," Victoria said, her voice sweet but dripping with condescension. Rebecca forced a polite smile. "Can I help you with something?" Victoria sauntered closer, her fingers grazing a flower vase as if inspecting every detail. "I just wanted to stop by and see Nathaniel. We have so many memories in this place, you know?" Before Rebecca could reply, Nathaniel entered the room. His expression darkened the moment he saw Victoria. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice firm. Victoria turned to him, her smile unbothered. "Honey, I just wanted to see who's replaced me here." She glanced at Rebecca, her meaning unmistakable. "She seems quite different." Nathaniel stepped forward, positioning himself protectively between Rebecca and Victoria. "Rebecca is my trusted employee. She doesn't need your evaluation." Victoria's smile faltered momentarily, but she quickly recovered. "Defend her all you want, but you know the elite circles won't accept her. Don't delude yourself, Nathaniel." Rebecca stood there, feeling as though she was being exposed under a spotlight. Victoria's words struck a nerve, feeding into her deepest insecurity, that she didn't belong in Nathaniel's world. After Victoria left, Rebecca resumed her work, but a heaviness lingered in her heart. Nathaniel, noticing the sadness in her expression, approached her. "Don't let her get to you," he said, his voice unusually gentle. "You belong here more than anyone else ever did." Rebecca looked at him, sensing the sincerity in his words, but even so, the doubts in her heart refused to fade completely. At the Cross Enterprises Charity Gala, one of the most anticipated events in New York's elite circles, Rebecca entered quietly, keeping to the edges of the grand ballroom. Glittering chandeliers cast a warm glow over the guests, who mingled in their finest attire. Rebecca felt out of place, but had come at Nathaniel's invitation. She couldn't bring herself to say no. It wasn't long before Victoria Lane made her dramatic entrance, exuding confidence and immediately drawing the room's attention. She strode directly toward Nathaniel, her smile sweet but her eyes sharp. Rebecca tried to remain unnoticed, standing further back, but she couldn't avoid hearing their exchange. "Nathaniel," Victoria whispered, her voice dripping with faux charm, "you can't possibly be serious about that girl. If you don't end this arrangement, I'll make sure the secrets about your company come to light. You know I have enough evidence to destroy everything you've built." Nathaniel's gray eyes hardened, a flicker of anger flashing through them. "You think I'm afraid of you, Victoria?" he said, his tone sharp. "Go ahead, do whatever you want. I'm done letting you or anyone else hold my past over me." Victoria's confident smirk faltered for a brief moment, but she quickly recovered. "We'll see, Nathaniel," she said, her voice still venomous. "Let's see how far you're willing to go for her." Nathaniel faced Victoria, his gray eyes cold but unwavering. "You can do whatever you want, Victoria," he said, his tone calm but resolute. "I'm done running from the past. Whatever you think you have over me no longer matters." Victoria faltered for a moment, clearly caught off guard by his response, but she quickly recovered, her composure as sharp as ever. "We'll see who comes out on top, Nathaniel," she said, her gaze flickering briefly to Rebecca before walking away with an icy smirk. Nathaniel turned, his eyes softening when they met Rebecca's. He stepped toward her, his voice gentle as he spoke. "I don't want you to feel unsafe here. You matter to me, Rebecca." Rebecca looked up at him, her heart warming at the sincerity in his words. Before she could respond, Nathaniel took her hand and led her toward the center of the room, directly into the spotlight. Stepping onto the stage, Nathaniel took the microphone, his commanding presence silencing the crowd. "I'm aware there have been many rumors about me recently," he began, his deep voice resonating through the hall, "and I want to set the record straight." The room fell silent, every eye on him. Nathaniel turned slightly, his gaze landing firmly on Rebecca. "Rebecca Clarke is not just an employee. She is the woman I love." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, followed by murmurs of disbelief and curiosity. Some guests exchanged shocked glances, while others whispered behind raised champagne glasses. Nathaniel, unfazed, continued, "She has helped me confront truths I've spent years avoiding. She has shown me that the past doesn't have to dictate my future." Rebecca stood frozen at the edge of the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt tears welling up, but it wasn't just embarrassment. It was joy, overwhelming and raw. Nathaniel's words felt like a shield, protecting her from every judgmental glance in the room. Rebecca felt tears welling in her eyes, but they weren't tears of embarrassment. They were tears of joy, of gratitude. As Nathaniel finished speaking, he stepped down from the stage, his hand reaching for hers. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said softly, his voice just for her. "The world can know how much I care for you, and I won't regret it." Rebecca smiled through her tears, warmth flooding her chest. She knew that no matter what the world thought, she and Nathaniel had chosen to face it together. The next morning, soft sunlight streamed through the expansive windows of the penthouse. Rebecca stood in the middle of the living room, taking in her surroundings. What was once a cold, lifeless space of perfect symmetry had transformed into a warm, vibrant home. Cream-colored sofas, fresh bouquets of colorful flowers, and the cozy glow of accent lighting brought the penthouse to life. Rebecca smiled, proud of what the space had become. After leaving her cleaning job behind, she had poured all her time and passion into pursuing her dream of interior design. With Nathaniel's unwavering support, she had reached milestones she once thought were impossible. One evening, while Rebecca was working on design sketches, Nathaniel walked into the room, holding a small box in his hand. He knelt before her, his gray eyes filled with both tenderness and determination. "Rebecca," he began, his voice steady but warm, "you came into my life so unexpectedly, bringing a light I didn't realize I needed. I can't imagine my life without you." Rebecca stared at him, her eyes widening in surprise, her heart pounding. Nathaniel opened the box to reveal a sparkling diamond ring. "Rebecca Clarke, will you marry me?" Tears filled Rebecca's eyes, and she smiled, nodding. "Yes, I will." Nathaniel's face broke into a radiant smile as he slid the ring onto her finger. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as if he never wanted to let her go. Their wedding took place in a charming garden just outside New York, a place Rebecca had always dreamed of. Under strings of twinkling lights, she walked down the aisle in a pristine white gown, her eyes never leaving Nathaniel, the man who had changed her life in ways she never imagined. As they exchanged vows, Nathaniel's deep voice resonated with love. "Rebecca, I promise to love you, in wealth or hardship, in joy or sorrow." With tears of happiness streaming down her cheeks, Rebecca replied, "I do, forever." That evening, as the lights of New York shimmered like stars, Rebecca stood by the penthouse window. For the first time, she felt a profound sense of peace. Everything she had endured, the doubts, the challenges, had all been worth it. Nathaniel approached her from behind, wrapping his arms around her. He whispered softly, "Life has a way of surprising us, but I don't regret you stepping into mine." Rebecca smiled, leaning into his embrace. "Neither do I. Everything happened the way it was meant to." And there, amidst the glowing city lights, they knew they had found their true home. Not just a place to live, but a life to share together.